So I decided to change the topic of my presentation today. For those of you who can notice, it says trusted knowledge infrastructure, not just knowledge infrastructure. And the reason I did that is I think that goes to the heart of what I want to talk about for the rest of the hour. As we all are moving into a world that's going to be increasingly AI-led, and I'll talk a little bit about what I think is real and pragmatic and possible and what is potentially out there and may or may not happen. But regardless, it's clear that all our businesses now are AI businesses. And let me talk a little bit about that. When I say AI business, I think of a business that is first and foremost thinking about ways to use AI to operate the business. So if you think about the pyramid, the hierarchy of expectations in a business, the biggest part of the business always is operation, right? With existing processes, existing products, existing business models. How do you operate it as effectively and efficiently as you can? That business operation of all our businesses, including eGain, small eGain, are today an AI business operation. So, for example, in eGain, we are now hiring in the operational groups for AI skills. We are looking at ways that our existing team members are going to use or are using AI to do their job today, as it stands, not a new job, the current job. And we are using AI to automate processes as much as possible. This has happened in this, span of 2 years. All our businesses now are AI businesses as far as operations are concerned. Now, as you think about the next level of the hierarchy, you get into building new products. And building new products with AI is still work in progress. Of course, programming part you can do with AI. That's all very exciting. But in terms of conceiving new products, thinking of improvements, it's still a work in progress. And then finally, you get to the level of new business models, which I would say today AI doesn't really impact as much, though I believe in the next few years it will. So what is an AI business operation? An AI business operation is a setup in which all straight-through processing is automated. And what I mean by that is all the happy paths are automated. Now, you might say, well, the happy paths require humans. They need experts. But if you look close enough, and I'll specifically talk about service and even in sales, it turns out that it's all about best practice responses and conversations. Much of that can be automated. Now, there will be exceptions. There will be situations where you need to have an expert jump in, and that's where the exceptions get handled by humans. That's an AI business. That's the business that we are talking about, that business needs a trusted knowledge infrastructure. Okay? Let's just zoom out, and I'll give you a little bit of synopsis of an interesting report that came out from this very well-known, I would say, analyst in the US called Mary Meeker. Who's heard about Mary before? Anyone? Yes, OK. So you are telling me you're my age, because she was an absolute god of internet analysis 25 years ago, right? But over time, she's kind of moved into the AI world now, and she put out this report recently, last month. It's called the AI report. I encourage you to go read it up. It's 400 slides of pretty interesting stuff. But the reason I'm bringing it up is the state of AI as it stands today, and I'm talking about AI. When I say AI, I mean mostly generative AI, even though there is other parts of it which are equally important, but not as impactful, I would say. So the number one thing that you realize with AI now, and I'll go out of order here, is the first thing I would say is that Gen AI performs well-specified micro tasks quite well. So what do I mean by micro tasks? What I mean is a well-specified task that could be done by someone who doesn't have a deep understanding of your business, but is, let's say, college-level educated, or even high school-level educated, right? Someone who can do that. Not extended tasks, but micro tasks, steps. It does it pretty well. It does it reliably. That's a big change from where things were 2 years ago. The next thing is, in terms of the big leap towards AGI, sort of artificial general intelligence, I think the jury is still out on that. I think that's being oversold, because clearly, I think there'll be a breakthrough at some point, but right now, these deep reasoning models, which claim to be getting closer to AGI, are really not there. They have a lot of hallucination. They seem to have issues around what's called model collapse, which means it just reflects back what you tell it. So I'd say AGI is still out there, not quite where we are today, even though if you hear some of the model builders, it's right around the corner. But keep in mind the first point, right, which is generative AI does microtasks pretty well. Then, the hallucination problem, again, if you limit yourself to microtasks, hallucinations are really not a big problem. If you limit yourself to microtasks. If you give it extended tasks, you will get hallucinations. So the reason I'm bringing these points up is, as we talk about the trusted knowledge infrastructure for an AI business, you have to understand what is the trusted knowledge infrastructure and why does it matter for you to make a big impact in your business with AI. And the last point on that is super important, which is the cost of generative AI in terms of use, not in terms of model building, in terms of use, is dropping like a rock, which is amazing and extremely exciting for all the users of Gen AI, like us. So 2.5 years ago, roughly, the first ChatGPT thing came out, right? November of 2022. The price point at that time of a unit of Gen AI work, let's keep that unit in mind, X number of tokens, input and output, whatever. That unit of work has become 33 times less expensive now in 2.5 years. 33 times less expensive. So if something costs $10, it's costing 30 cents right now. In 2.5 years. Just to put it in perspective, compute power, the Moore's law, many of you are aware of it, says the cost of computing drops by half every 18 months. And that's been true over 45 years now. The cost of storage drops by half every 12 months. And that's also true over the last 40 plus years. The cost of Gen AI use is dropping by half every 6 months. Why do I bring it up? Because in an AI business, if you are putting these capabilities to use, and if you have a project that's going to come out in 12 months or 18 months, you have to factor that sort of impact. While the capabilities may not change dramatically, the price points are changing dramatically. And that means now this is the time for engineering AI-based solutions to automate your business, which is where we all come in. So let's look at it. I put this picture up because I want you to keep this picture in mind as to what Gen AI is today. Today, and for the foreseeable future, it's a new college grad, doesn't know anything about your business, but can read whatever you give it, this person. It can understand a problem, and if there is a way to solve that problem using those documents or knowledge that you give it, chances are they'll be able to solve it. That's what Gen AI is. So that sounds like a pretty good picture, wouldn't you say? I think all in all, it's a very, very exciting and optimistic picture. This is the challenge. This is a huge challenge because in the rush to take advantage of AI, this critical fact has been overlooked. And that's okay. People are coming around to it. Most of you who are already engaged in these projects are probably well aware of this problem. And this problem is not because of Gen AI. It's been around forever. It's simply been made very painfully evident with Gen AI. In the past, and even today, most businesses have lots of knowledge in content silos. And how do employees deal with it? Well, they deal with it by talking to each other, by recognizing they got all this duplication and inconsistency and irrelevant knowledge, and they kind of work through that. They make mistakes. It's a mess. You just don't see it. But when Gen AI comes in, it becomes very evident because you start seeing the results and they look like garbage. Not all the time, but frequently enough. And so I put this prediction from Gartner up for two reasons. One, because this came out in July of last year, so I guess it's already a bit dated, but this is the most recent one they had come out with. I've been working with Gartner for a very long time. I have never seen a prediction that says 100%. Have you? From Gartner? I've never seen it. It's always 70, 80, 60. You always hedge your bets. After all, you're predicting the future. They are so sure of it that without that knowledge infrastructure, which is what they call a modern knowledge management system, all the AI tools on top of it are not going to do the job. So let's talk about what it means to have a trusted knowledge infrastructure. And let me just give you a little bit of sense of why I want to focus on I want to get to the point where we realize the criticality of that infrastructure. And I'll give you a simple example, right? Knowledge, know-how in general, is an optional capability in every business. And you might say, well, that doesn't make sense. You obviously need knowledge. Yeah, you do need knowledge, but you don't have to use it in your daily work. You don't have to. No one is watching you. If you don't use the best knowledge to do your job, it's not easy to figure that out. You make small mistakes here and there. You gloss over things. You don't do the best thing. You do the third best thing, whatever comes to your mind first. In an optional environment where knowledge is optional, whereas, for example, a customer information system is not optional, right? If you're in a service environment and a call comes in and you need to change the information for the customer, you have to use that tool. There is no other way. But if the customer asks you a question and you feel like the knowledge tool is a little hard to use, you know what? You're just going to remember whatever you remember, or you just lean across, ask someone, and give the answer. You see the difference? So, with knowledge, value comes from high adoption. It's very evident and obvious statement, but just stay with me. And high adoption requires two things. It requires trust in the knowledge so that you feel like it's worth it. And second, it should be low effort. It should be very consumable. As one of our clients, I think last year we were in our customer conference in the US, and she said, I want my team members to trip over the knowledge. It should be so easy. Right? So that tripping over knowledge is the easy part of knowledge. How consumable is it? If it's all around you, is it in the flow of work? So trust and consumability are two critical attributes. Single source of truth. That's an absolute fundamental requirement of a trusted knowledge system. The moment you have multiple versions, two places to go to, you aren't sure. So the picture kind of looks like this. I'm sure you've seen this picture in some form or the other from eGain, but I wanted to put it up because there are a couple of things I want you to understand here in this infrastructure. Number one, it's about centralizing all the content and knowledge in your business. Centralization is really important because that gives you a single source of truth. Now, to do that, in the past, without the AI tools that have become possible now over the last few years, was a pretty challenging exercise. A lot of effort. Because the effort was high, it rarely got done. Some businesses did it. The early adopters, the real forward-thinking companies did it. Most companies could never get to it. So that centralization now is a lot easier, and you'll see some of that through the day, both from our clients as well as from some of my colleagues as we talk about what we do now with our solutions. You can see it on the demo floor as well. That centralization then gives you the single source of truth. On the other side, you need to have the capability to update and curate and organize the knowledge very easily. In the past, that had been a very laborious exercise. That's also something that has changed now. So the reason I'm bringing this whole thing up is that the infrastructure can now be made possible with the technology that's available. Now, a couple of words about trust. Trust is very hard to quantify. In fact, I don't think there is a standard way to quantify trust. You can talk about relevance, you can talk about matches and all that in search, but trust is a human sense, right? And this is our way of looking at it. It has certain attributes. And let me walk you through these attributes and why this is important in a typical example. A user asks a question, and the question goes through some sort of an omni-channel interface. I'm calling it an omni-channel conversational interface because that is the most natural way for a user to engage. And that question then goes to some sort of a knowledge system, and an answer comes out, output back to the user. Simple loop, right? Now let's add some points of trust along the way. And this is what makes the difference between someone trusting content that comes back and someone saying, yeah, that's good, but let me just ask someone else. Or, you know what, maybe this is not quite the answer because you feel otherwise, right? You may have had some recent experience as a service agent, a service advisor. The context of the question, the intention of the user, and how to establish that in the journey, getting all the way back to the relevance. Wow, this is a long one. This is a big stage. To the relevance, determining the relevance, getting to the explanation behind the response, and finally personalizing that response back to the user. And you will see this time and again in some of our demonstrations, how the systems that you put together for knowledge must keep these attributes in mind to generate trust in the response. And last but not least, a collaboration process so the user feels like they have a stake in your knowledge and your answers. So a way for them to provide feedback, to rate, potentially even gamify. Now, all this It's not as if you need all of it working perfectly to have a knowledge infrastructure that is trusted. But the more of this you have, the more trusted your knowledge infrastructure. So I'll draw out a picture for you. Now, this might look complicated, but it's really not that complicated. It's a simple way of thinking about left to right, from the south end, meaning all the back-end systems in an organization, all the way through to the north end, which is on the right, which are the consumption points in the organization. Now, keep in mind today, we start mostly all our conversation around knowledge and AI in eGain's context, keeping the customer engagement, customer service as the primary function we are trying to help. But that's just the landing point. Because once you have a knowledge infrastructure for customer engagement, you can easily extend that out through your organization. So I'll talk about a couple of things here which are really important. And this is very rapid innovation that we are doing, and the market and the industry, everyone is in it together. How do you make sure that your content silos, which are probably SharePoint, Confluence, CRM systems, websites, how do you make sure that you can aggregate all that without a lot of manual work and keep working that connectivity and centralization? How do you do that? Well, you need connectors into these systems. Guess what? We have built those connectors now into SharePoint, into Confluence, into Salesforce, and we continue to add more. That gives you the ability to take many of these silos and bring them, all that content into the Knowledge Hub. But that's not knowledge yet, right? That's still content that you now have to work on to synthesize the knowledge. So there are tools in the Knowledge Hub to synthesize knowledge, which is consistent, correct, compliant. Now, you need experts in the loop for that, but you need AI tools to do that fast and easy. So the synthesis happens. Then you need to manage and publish it. And that publication of knowledge becomes super interesting, because 2 years ago, the primary consumers were humans. Now, I would say the businesses, and many of you in the room here, your primary focus is bots and agents who are going to consume that knowledge. And so your APIs need to be real time. They need to have the level of capability to feed into the RAG engines or your apps or your mobile devices, whatever your interface to the end consumer is through AI. So it used to be that most of the conversation would be at the top, and still is with some of the conversational tools, but now increasingly we are seeing more and more focus on the programmatic interfaces, not just the conversational and graphical interfaces. This entire picture is what constitutes the knowledge infrastructure. So imagine this across your business so that now all your AI capability that is mostly Gen AI based is being fed this correct, consistent, compliant answers and content. That's what we are talking about when we say trusted knowledge infrastructure. Part of that, and I'll just give you a little bit of view into the kind of capabilities we have added into our platform to help with that synthesis of knowledge. Right? Knowledge synthesis is a multi-step exercise, and I'm sure those of you who are practitioners know this well. Right? There are dozens of little steps that you have to go through in order to take content which may be very long-winded, may still be correct, check it against everything else that is in your knowledge base to make sure there's no duplication, make sure it follows your compliance policies, make sure it follows your guidelines on the way content should be written and structured. There's a million little steps. What we have done is we have created all these small tools, all AI-based for the most part, but they can be strung together in workflows so that you can orchestrate that synthesis process with an expert overseeing it. What does that do? In real terms, it cuts down the amount of time it takes for you to synthesize knowledge, especially in the beginning when you have all this historic content that you have to plow through. That time, we have noticed, is being cut by a factor of 5. So imagine, and this is obviously something we have seen as well, I'm sure you have, a lot of good ideas in businesses around technology implementations start out with imagining the possible. Right? You say, oh, I wish this were all possible. So you can imagine that. Then you plan for what you think is probable. But ultimately, when you look at what really gets done, it's what is easy. So the easier the process of this aggregation and synthesis, the faster the solution gets up and going. We have now customers who are able to finish up their projects in half the time they used to take 2 years ago, half. And that includes all the dead time. So big improvement in that automation. And just examples of tools that are embedded in the author's environment to be able to adjust the tone, the style, the compliance rules, all of those can be executed instantly on pieces of content. Some of that can be automated in workflows as well. So the author doesn't have to go through that manually. Of course, they still have to review it. And then the back end of this, again, you're seeing this firsthand, I'm sure. Prompts are the new programming. And in fact, it's even harder to manage prompts than it is to manage what used to be structured language programs. Because it's awfully hard to tell the difference between a prompt, which is 2 pages long, and nowadays prompts can be very long, I'm sure you know that, and look at 2 versions of it, and a few tokens here and there can change the eventual output. So prompt management is a huge issue in any AI-based platform. Knowledge infrastructure, knowledge management is no exception. You need to have a very robust prompt management environment with workflows, with versioning, with audits and controls. Who can use what prompts? Because those are like programs now. So built into our platform is this idea of prompt management. I bring all this out because from your standpoint, when you're thinking about creating this knowledge layer, maybe you're thinking about these things, maybe you're not, but these are the things we know you will have to worry about as you get into rolling these things out. Again, I'm zooming out on a customer service environment. In a customer service environment, if you had a modern knowledge hub right in the center, the purple box, there are so many ways, obvious ways, that you can improve the experience and bring down the cost through automation. It's pretty obvious, right? Because if you have the ability to generate answers, then those answers can be can be deployed forward as much as you want. It can be deployed through proactive service. It can be deployed through self-service. It can be then in details deployed in the escalation channels. But the core of it is still one knowledge hub, one knowledge management system. That's the power. All the other stuff you have in your customer service environment, not to play it down, but that's plumbing. The questions and answers is the stuff that flows through, right? If you get that right, the plumbing becomes less important, as long as it is there. So we talked about trust. We talked about the possibility of the value a trusted knowledge infrastructure can deliver to an AI business operation. Let's talk about consumability, because I feel that's as important and sort of the other half of the puzzle. So trusted content, highly consumable. The two together make for adoption. That drives value. Back to the original formula. What's the easiest way to consume knowledge? It's a rhetorical question. Conversational. Ask a question, get an answer. Ask more questions. Have a conversation. That's how we humans consume knowledge. It starts with a question, always. So conversational stuff is getting easier and easier to build. But there are some things that trip a lot of businesses as they implement these conversational tools. The most important one is, if you don't feed it the right content, you're going to get garbage answers on the other side. That's the fundamental problem. So now that we ground it, we root it into a trusted knowledge backbone, the hub that we call, our ability to deliver these conversations which are trusted, reliable, and verifiable with sources goes up. We have also, what we have done, because we realize that sometimes building a knowledge base is a few weeks or a few months of work, depending on how much content you have to begin with. How can you get instant gratification with these conversational tools? So what we have done is made it possible for you to point it to your trusted content as long as it's a small amount. Documents, PDFs, website sections, things that you know for a fact is trusted content. And if the total number of content pieces is in the, I'd say double digits, you can manage that. So it's a nice way to crawl, walk around. And then you can still connect it back into your knowledge hub and handle hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of content pieces. So that is something we built into the solution. Now, the architecture, the way we have built it, is such that you can connect multiple agents that can collaborate with each other, that can connect into transactional back-end systems that you may have, whether it's a customer system or a billing system or a shipping system. Many people can do that. Everyone claims to do it. There is a catch. And you will see that when you see our demos. This idea of trusted actions is really important. A lot of providers, and we included, realize that as you build these action options from inside a model, inside a language model, there is a chance that you get it wrong. In other words, if you have 20 actions to choose from, essentially 20 methods, the model could sometimes get it wrong. Instead of picking the right API call to make it number 20, it might pick up number 20, might pick up number 12. Hallucinations can be a problem when the number of actions becomes large. When you have 2 or 3 actions, it seems to be OK. So we have built some capability inside it using our core technologies to be able to assure that the right actions are verified, confirmed, and then executed. So that's kind of exciting, what we call trusted actions. This is an example of our self-service capability. Right? Now, it's available as a widget. We've also made it available through an app, which is a reference app, and you can take it and you can change it. The thing to focus here is we are conversing with the customer with evidence, reasoning, and dialogue, all automatically driven from your content. It's your content that we're using for having this dialogue, right? And therefore, hallucinations are going to be a minimum. Will it be 0? I'm pretty sure no one can guarantee that. But it'll be super low, and we have tested that. As we built that solution, we got a lot of feedback from our clients, some of you and many in other parts of the world as well. And the primary thing we heard from them was that while the customer self-service capability is very exciting, at first they wanted to use this solution to assist their agents. And for us, that was interesting because agent assistance historically we have done through our portals, the knowledge portals. You search it, you get answers. So we built out this way of consuming our knowledge, which is conversational and integrated into your CCaaS, into your contact center environment. so that we are listening in real time to the conversation between the agent and the customer. We're listening real time, and we are trying to determine intent and sub-intent. And if we get to a certain threshold, we break threshold of confidence, then we present that. And with the confirmation of the agent, we start to guide the agent proactively through a resolution. We also added this capability where, because you know the agent, you know the profile of the agent, you can guide agents differently depending on their proficiency on that topic. So if that agent is highly proficient in bill shock issues, then you don't want to guide them through trivial steps. You can give them ways to guide them much more efficiently, whereas someone who's new to the process will be guided through many more small baby steps. So that kind of dynamic adjustment, which is really important for adoption, again, focusing on that adoption, because without adoption, it doesn't matter. And finally, summarizing and wrapping up, which is always a useful thing in a contact center, as you know. That's a big source of time sink and therefore savings. This is an example of how that experience looks. This is a screen that would be embedded inside an agent desktop. So it could be Salesforce, could be a CCaaS environment like Genesys or Amazon Connect. We connect into all these three out of the box. On the left side, you have the conversation that is being transcribed as the real-time conversation continues, and we are monitoring and listening to that. As we're going through that, our agent determines at some point, if it can, that there is an intent and sub-intent that it knows how to resolve. And so that shows up right at the top here on the right side. So it talks about metering issues, intent, and replacement request as a sub-intent with a level of confidence. And you can configure that confidence for when it breaks threshold. At that point, you have a choice. You can configure it such that the agent can say, yes, I need help, or you can just force the issue and start helping the customer. And start helping the agent. And when that happens, the experience on the right side kicks in, which is a guidance. Now, that guidance can be based on case-based reasoning, so going through predetermined processes that are guided, or using your content to do dynamic guidance using our agent. We can do both. And eventually, obviously, summarize, get to the resolution, and get going. I bring this up because this speaks to the issue of consumability. It's the same knowledge. You can present it through a widget. You can present it in the first option, which I talked about, the self-service option, or you can present it this way, embedded inside the flow of work of the agent. Guess which one will get used more? We think it's this one, and obviously our customers who love this feel the same way. In fact, we have a few customers, and this is Kim from one of our clients, Alight, which is a big BPO in the US. This is a presentation she made 2 years ago. But the point I'm making is they are one of the clients who has made a big push into the AI agent for contact centers. They want to drive that. They want to make sure that their agents are guided through every conversation. And that requires that knowledge infrastructure. It requires the trusted content and a consumable interface. And that's what we are working with them to deliver. In your business, as you think about how do you automate the operation and how do you minimize the level of exceptions that require human input, having that knowledge infrastructure is going to be one of the foundational things that you have to look at. Now, you don't have to do all of it right away, but you have to start with something. and the right platform so that as you add more and more centralization of knowledge, you're able to then ensure that all your content that is fed into your AI engines is correct, consistent, and compliant. So that's the direction that we believe will yield the best possible service experience as well as cost benefits. Now, we make a bold statement here. I'm sure you can see the numbers. 75% reduction in your total service cost is a big number. How many of you believe it's possible in the next 2 years? Nobody. Okay. All right. I will wager that we can do this for whoever believes that they can work with us in the direction of this kind of cost efficiency gains. And I'll tell you why I believe it's possible. A, getting to 75% reduction in service cost is two halves. 2 times you have to halve your cost, right? So the first time you have to halve your cost. And another time you have to halve your cost to get to 75% reduction. The first half, we believe, broadly, comes from increased self-service with the kind of agent experience that we had talked about. The next half comes from making your agents, your human agents, twice as productive, which comes from the second manifestation, the contact center one that we talked about. We believe it's very possible, and I'll give you a small anecdote for that. Last year, about 15 months ago, I was here in London. We had an exec dinner with about 10 of our customers and a few prospects. And I broached this number of 75%. And I asked exactly the same question. It was a small group. And no one raised their hand. And I said, fair enough. I believe it's possible. When I was done with my kind of whatever comments I was making, I went back, sat at the table. This gentleman next to me, who's a customer of ours now, I asked him, what did he think? And he said, too aggressive. So I said, what's your target? He's a senior guy. He said, 50%. I said, well, give it a year. Let's see what happens. Guess what? Yesterday, I met with him. And I asked him how things are. And he said, we've already cut, not just because of eGain, other things they're doing too, they're already down by 50% on the overall organizational cost. So you may feel it's aggressive, and maybe it is for your business, possible. But I can assure you that your CXOs are putting that sort of number in their 3-year roadmaps. So collectively, we have an opportunity. We can go after this. We can drive an agenda which creates an operating environment that uses AI smartly, responsibly, and at scale. It needs trusted knowledge, trusted content. It needs consumable interfaces. And most of all, it needs a partner who can help you through that journey if you wish for such a partnership. If you have all the skills in-house, perfect. You can just take the tools and work with it. Or you can just do it yourself. And I think a lot of companies have given it a whirl in trying to do it themselves. I'm sure you've heard of just take a RAG engine and connect it to your AI front end, and that should do the job. How many of you have had that sort of project in your business? AI engine, Gen AI with RAG behind it. Okay, I'm sure you have it in your businesses. Maybe not in your groups. I know for a fact that many of our clients have gone through that exercise in their AI teams. And they've got very exciting prototypes going. And then when they try to scale it, it just keels over because of all the things I talked about, which is guaranteeing correctness, guaranteeing consistency, guaranteeing compliance. The things that every enterprise needs before it can build scalable production rollout successful. That's what our knowledge infrastructure with the AI agent front end can deliver for you. So I know you may be a little skeptical about the 75%. I'm very bullish about it. I believe that in 2 to 3 years, that can be a reality for a business that starts today. Not instantly, but in small, concrete steps.